Welcome. My name is Mark Gunning, and I'm the moderator for today's debate. I think you will find this exchange to be very interesting and very important, for it touches upon the vital issue of how man is made right before God. The thesis for today's debate is the Protestant doctrine of justification, sola fide, by faith alone, can be sustained by the biblical data. Defending this position will be James White. Denying this position will be Dr. Robert Prestigi. Allow me to briefly introduce our speakers. James White is the director of Alpha and Omega Ministries, a Christian apologetics organization based in Phoenix, Arizona. James holds a bachelor's degree in Bible and a minor in Koine Greek from Grand Canyon University, and a master's degree in theology from Fuller Theological Seminary. He is the author of 7 books, including works on Roman Catholicism, Mormonism, the translation and text of the Bible, and Christian theology. He has had the privilege of serving as professor of church history and an instructor in biblical Greek. He is an ordained Baptist minister and has engaged in scholarly debates with Roman Catholic apologists all across the United States. Dr. Robert Prestigi holds a PhD in theology from Fordham University in New York. He is an associate professor of religious studies at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, where he has taught since 1985. Dr. Prestigi and his wife, Kathy, have 2 children and are expecting their 3rd. Our debate today will be strictly timed and organized so as to ensure fairness. Both speakers will give 15-minute opening statements, Mr. White going first, as he is defending the thesis. After the 15-minute statements, we will have 5-minute rebuttals. Then we will have a period of question and answer, again timed and controlled, which will be followed by 5-minute closing statements. I hope you will listen closely, as both of our participants have spent much time preparing to provide you with the best their position has to offer. With that, let us begin. Mr. White, your 15-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you very much. Martin Luther once said, "If any man ascribe aught of his salvation, even the least part, to the free will of man, he knows nothing of grace and has not learned Jesus Christ." I believe Luther understood something that, by God's grace, I will explain more fully during this debate. That what separates those who follow the Scripture's presentation of the gospel from everyone else, no matter what label they may wear, is just this. The gospel is the power of God unto salvation. God saves people perfectly, completely, and without dependence upon the additions, works, or merit of men. The issue truly is, can God justify men by His grace alone, or is He dependent upon man to complete the process? The thesis of our debate today is the Protestant doctrine of justification, sola fide, by faith alone, can be sustained by the biblical data. To understand why 2 men would engage in a debate over such a topic, we must begin first by defining the issues that give form to the debate. Roman Catholic scholar Ludwig Ott, in his book Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, said the following concerning the idea of achieving justification, quote, "The reason for the uncertainty of the state of grace lies in this, that without a special revelation nobody can with certainty of faith know whether or not he has fulfilled all the conditions which are necessary for achieving justification," end quote. The debate today is well served by the statement from Dr. Ott. Must we fulfill all the conditions which are necessary according to Roman Catholicism for achieving justification? Or are men made right with God by His free and merciful grace, not on the basis of what they do in a state of grace, but upon the basis of what Christ did as their perfect substitute? That is the issue before us. The Protestant, and I believe the biblical doctrine of justification, differs from the Roman Catholic view in 4 very important and foundational aspects. First, we differ on the meaning and extent of the term justification. Secondly, we differ on the meaning of the term impute or imputation. Thirdly, we differ on the instrument by which justification has taken place. Is it faith alone or faith plus works? And fourth, finally, we differ on the grounds or basis upon which sinful men can be justified. Let us begin with some definitions. Allow me to provide the Protestant position taken from the 1689 Baptist Confession of Faith, which agrees in every way with that of the Westminster Confession of Faith. Those whom God effectually calls, He also freely justifies, not by infusing righteousness into them, but by pardoning their sins and by accounting and accepting their persons as righteous, not for anything wrought in them or done by them, but for Christ's sake alone, not by imputing faith itself, the act of believing, or any other evangelical obedience to them as their righteousness, but by imputing Christ's active obedience under the whole law and passive obedience in His death for their whole and sole righteousness, they receiving and resting on Him and His righteousness by faith, which faith they have not of themselves, it is the gift of God. Faith, thus receiving and resting on Christ and his righteousness, is the alone instrument of justification. Yet it is not alone in the person justified, but is ever accompanied with all other saving graces, and is no dead faith, but worketh by love. Christ, by his obedience and death, did fully discharge the debt of all those that are justified, and did, by the sacrifice of himself and the blood of his cross, undergoing in their stead the penalty due unto them, make a proper, real, and full satisfaction to God's justice in their behalf. Yet, inasmuch as he was given by the Father for them, and his obedience and satisfaction accepted in their stead, and both freely, not for anything in them, their justification is only of free grace, that both the exact justice and right grace of God might be glorified in the justification of sinners." End quote. And the Westminster Shorter Catechism summed it up well by stating this question: what is justification? Answer: justification is an act of God's free grace wherein he pardons all our sins and accepts us as righteous in his sight only for the righteousness of Christ imputed to us and received by faith alone. Note the following terms. Justification is said to be an act of God wherein he declares the believer righteous. Justification, therefore, is a legal, forensic declaration on the part of God concerning the believer. Justification is undertaken by God and is not based upon anything done in or done by the believer. It is an act of sovereign grace. Justification is based solely and completely upon the merits of another, that being Jesus Christ. Justification involves the imputation of the righteousness of Christ, both his perfect life as well as his perfect all-sufficient atoning sacrifice to the believer, upon which basis the believer is called righteous. Justification is by grace through faith. Faith is the instrument or means of appropriating justification. This faith is a true saving faith. It is not an empty faith, but is the work of God in the believer's heart. Justification, while distinct from sanctification, cannot possibly be separated from it. God changes man in regeneration and sanctification. God declares man righteous in justification. Any man who is justified will be sanctified. It is impossible to separate justification and sanctification, but it is absolutely necessary to distinguish between them. Justification is a once-for-all action. Since it is based upon the completed work of Christ, it cannot be undone or destroyed by the actions of men. We look back upon our justification, as Paul said in Romans 5:1. Now, are we justified only after being baptized? And is justification something that can be undone by human evil? Are we required to go through a sacrament of confession involving contrition, confession, doing works of satisfaction? Is God working in us so that we ourselves can make satisfaction for our sins? Or did Christ make full and complete satisfaction in our place on Calvary, so that now God is working in us to conform us to the image of Christ?